Hello guys, how are you? I know it's been a while, but here we are with another video on JavaScript this time. So far, as you all know, we've been trying to structure our elements on the website and make them beautiful afterwards using CSS. But in this video, we're going to learn how we can use JavaScript, the programming language of the web, to basically give them functionality, give those elements that we've been making beautiful and everything, some functionality so for example, when you click on a button, certain things will happen to that page and it's dynamic and not static as opposed to before. In order for us to actually learn how we can interact with those elements using JavaScript, first we need to understand JavaScript and know how it works. For example, how statements works, how its syntax is, how we can write functions, loops, everything. Of course, we're not going to discuss what a programming language is in this video, and it is assumed that you guys know functions, loops, and everything, and statements, and all that. I'm going to explain a little bit about them, but I'm not going to go too deep in them. So we're just going to explain JavaScript. Let's get started. So to start, we can open up Chrome and go to Inspect menu, which is what we call Chrome Developer Tools. And in Developer Tools, we can do so many cool things. For example, inspect the elements, the HTML elements on the website. We can go to the console, see what's being logged there, and source and network and so many other tabs, which we can actually discuss later. But for now, what's really important to us is this tab, which is called Sources. Here we need to go to the Snippets menu. If you can't see Snippets menu from here, you can actually click on this, and it could be over here. It definitely is here, I mean. So yeah, just select the Snippets menu, and from here, we're going to go ahead and create a new snippet and call it first JavaScript file. Yeah, why not? And here we can easily just write JavaScript and test it out and see how it's going to look. So for example, we can write something like x is equal to 2. First we have to say, for example, is it a variable, is it a constant, what is it? And this is how we actually define a variable. So we say var x equal to 2, and then we put a semicolon at the end. And if you actually want to see what x looks like, we just type in x and a semicolon, and then we run the file. How do we run the file? We run it by clicking Control and Enter together. This, and there we go. You can see that it's x is logged to the console here when we write x over here. So what this very simple program does is it defines a variable called x, and stores the number 2 inside of it, and then it just logs it out. And so a little about JavaScript variables. JavaScript variables, as opposed to other programming languages variables, they don't actually have a certain type of variables. For example, you don't define x as an integer or a boolean or a string or anything. You just simply call it a variable, meaning that it can store pretty much anything inside of it, and it's not really bound to any type. So x can be either a number, it can be a true or false, it can be a string, like this. You can write your name in it. This is a string, so yeah, it can be a string, it can be so many other things like an object, which is, for example, like name, Ali. This is an object in JavaScript. We're going to get to all these later. It can store everything, okay? It can actually store a function too, which is the value of the function. We're going to get to all that later. So yeah, JavaScript variables store everything. That's the first thing you need to know. Let's get a little deeper. Let's go ahead and define a variable called x and set it to 2. Okay, and let's define another variable called y and set it to 5. Let's perform some sort of instructions, statements on these. So we can actually say, let's define a new variable z and set it equal to x plus y. Okay, let's see what z looks like. Control Enter, and it is 7, which is 2 plus 5. Okay, and also do other things like multiply these two numbers, which is going to be 10. We can do subtraction. -3, and you get the idea, right? So we can do all these in JavaScript very easily as well. Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the if statement in JavaScript. And the if statement, just like the name implies, is for when you want to give a condition to the program and say, do these things when this condition is met. For example, we want to say if z is greater than 2, then console.log z is greater than 2. And what is the console.log? Console.log basically just logs this thing inside the parentheses to the console over here, or it actually opens up down here too. But yeah, so what we do here is like if z is greater than 2, then console.log z is greater than 2, this string, okay? And then we can say else, meaning if it's not greater than 2, which is when it's less than or equal to 2, then you're going to say console.log z is less than or equal to 2. Okay? We're not going to forget about the semicolon. Oh, I think I forgot to tell you guys. Each statement is separated by a semicolon. You got to put a semicolon at the end of each statement. Otherwise, there could be issues for your program. You know, for example, it wouldn't really cause a problem if I removed this semicolon and ran the program. Okay? uh, because we're actually separating these lines by a space, by an enter, right? And an enter wouldn't cause a problem. But say your program was like this, okay? Now this is going to cause a problem because they're not separated by a line. So it's generally just better to put the semicolon at the end, and you guys have to. If you're listening to me, you have to use the semicolons, and don't be like other people who don't use semicolons. So just in general, keep this in mind. Use semicolons at the end of each line because it's just better. Yeah. So yeah, we are not going to forget about the semicolons. And yeah, just to review, what's going to happen is let me just close this for a second. Uh, if z is greater than 2, we're going to say z is greater than 2. Otherwise, using the else statement, we're going to say z is less than or equal to 2. Alright, so let's actually run this using control and enter, and we can see that yes, z is less than or equal to 2, because if you guys remember, z is actually equal to -3 here, so it makes sense. Cool. Yeah, just so you guys know, we can actually start chaining the we call them, I think, if nesting. We can actually nest all these if statements using this structure. For example, we can say if z is greater than 2, then do this. Else, meaning otherwise, if, for example, z is greater than, z is less than -2, then console.log then that z is less than or equal z, actually less than -2, and then we can actually say here else if it's not none of those statements, then console.log it's neither. Okay, so it's neither greater than 2 nor less than -2. And let's actually say yeah, z is equal to 4. No, wait, 0. And then run this again, and it says yeah, it's neither, because z is neither greater than 2 nor less than -2. So it says it's neither. So yeah, let's actually review this one more time. First, we say if z is greater than 2, then do this for us, please. Else, meaning otherwise, if z is less than -2, then say yeah, it's less than -2. Okay. And otherwise, if it's nothing from the above if statements, then please say console.log it's neither. Or we can actually do whatever else we want here. So we're not really limited. We can do whatever we want between these curly braces, but this is just for the purpose of demonstration to you. Cool. So that's the if statement. By the way, if you guys want to clear the console, you simply click Control and L, and this is going to just clear the console for you. And sometimes it gets really messy there. So yeah, there's that. The next thing we're going to do is talk about something called loops. And loops are just one essential structure in every programming languages. in every programming language, and JavaScript is no exception. So we're going to start writing a loop. And in every programming language, there are generally two forms of loops. The first one is a for loop, and the second one is a while loop. We're going to start by talking about the for loop and demonstrate it as we go. So let's start type for, and as you guys can see, there are so many cool hints that the console itself gives to you, and you can actually just fill everything using the recommended commands. Okay, so the way it works is that first we define a variable called index, and then we set it and then we set it to 0. Okay, so we say let index equal to 0, and there is a small difference between let and var, but that's related to scoping, and we're not going to talk about it here. Okay, but just pretty much the same. Let and var are pretty much the same when it comes to defining variables. And so we first set index to 0, and then we put the condition in the middle, okay, and say that if index is less than bound, which is just a number that we set, say 5, then you're going to execute the body, okay. If index is less than 5, then you're going to execute the body, which is, for example, say console.log index, which is only going to log the index in the console, okay? And then when it actually executes the body after checking the condition, it increments index by 1. Basically index plus plus means index is equal to, this is a shorthand actually, it means index is equal to index plus 1. Okay, that's what it means. So yeah, what it does is that it increments index by 1. So if, for example, for whatever reason, you want to increase index by 2, you say index is equal to index plus 2. Sorry, plus 2. Or like you can actually multiply or create weird loops like that. So for now, we're just going to stick with 1. And yeah, let's run it. And yep, what we can see here is, let's actually expand the console and everything so that we can see everything much better. Yeah, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And why is that? Let's actually go over and analyze it again. So the way it works is first we define a variable called index, set it to 0, and then we check the condition, which is always in the middle. Well, basically we check that if index is less than 5, is it less than 5? Well, it is 0 at first. Then we're going to console.log it, basically execute the body, and by that we just put the index into the console, we put 0 into the console, and then what we do is just after we're done executing the console, we increment index by 1, and that's it. And then we go back to the beginning of the for loop. We're not going to define the variable again. All we do is check the condition, is it less than 5, then do this, and then after that increment it again, check, do this, increment, check, do this, increment, check, do this, increment, until the condition doesn't hold up anymore, and basically index is either equal to 5 or it's more than 5, which in the case of 5 it is, and then it's going to terminate the loop, so the body is not going to be executed, and we're not, of course, going to increment this after because the body is not executed. So yeah, that's how a for loop works. Yeah, I did say I didn't want to get too deep into these, but apparently I can't help myself. So yeah, and that's the for loop. The next step in learning how JavaScript works is actually getting into VS Code and starting to code a little and see how it actually helps us give functionality to our website, right? So by now you know how it works a little bit, you know the basics of JavaScript. Now we're gonna dive head deep into the thing and start doing some actual uh, function-driven programming. So over here, by the way, sorry about the cut. I had to change a few things to make this a little more interesting. So yeah, over here we have the good old boilerplate of HTML, doc type HTML head body, and inside the body tag we have a main div and a blue div, and under the blue div we have a button called change color with the ID of change color that says click me. We also have a certain set of styles for them, which are not really going to concern us for this video. You already know how to style things because you've already watched my 3 videos on that, right? And also we have a little index.js file over here, in which we're going to put our JavaScript code. Okay. So let's actually open up the file and see how it looks. This is what it actually looks like. Let us actually change the title to something else. It says CSS Advanced. I'm going to say JavaScript Part 1. Reload the page. There you go. That's the title. And yeah, so actually we can see this div over here and this click me button that is begging us to click it. So yeah, the challenge here is I'm going to define a challenge here for you guys. What we're going to do is when we click on this button over here, we want this div to get a random color, okay, and switch to that random color. So every time you click on this button, it's going to change the color of that div to something random, okay? It's not going to be something preset or anything. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. And you guys should be sure that we cannot achieve this using CSS and HTML, and JavaScript is our solution. So let's get started. We're going to go back to VS Code, and here the first thing we got to do is discuss how we can actually link the JavaScript file or JavaScript code to our HTML file. And there are three main ways, just like CSS. The first one is adding it to the head tag, so we can actually write something called a script tag. And in this tag, we can actually write JavaScript, okay, like var x, okay. And this works perfectly. We can put it either in the head tag, or we can actually put our JavaScript in the body tag as well. And they usually put it at the end of the body tag, but I don't think it really matters in the head tag where you put it. So yeah, these are the two ways. The first one is putting it in the head tag, the second one is putting it in the body tag, and the third and the most recommended way is to actually create a separate JavaScript file and linking it to this HTML file, okay? And we're going to go with that option for this video, but keep in mind that sometimes they do use the other two methods as well. Okay, so let's actually start linking it. And how do we link it? We link it by again putting this script tag, and we have to say src is equal to yes, src is equal to src and then index.js, and that's how we link our index.js file with our javascript.html. Okay. There's actually another optional attribute that we can actually put here, and it's the type, in which you can say this is a JavaScript file. Okay. I don't know if I actually typed it correctly, so yeah, hopefully it's right. But let's just get rid of it because it's optional. Because you know, in the future when we actually start writing React.js code, we actually need to say type is equal to JSX. Cool. And that's something we're going to get to in the future. I'm so excited for that. But for now, we're just going to get rid of that and just stick with src. So, yeah, index.js is now linked, and we can easily go write JavaScript code in this. And yeah, that's as easy as that. So our main challenge here is that, okay, so let's go over the problem again. The problem is we are going to first click on this button. And what we expect the program to do is change the color of this div over here to a random color. Okay. So for that, we're going to have to first know how we can actually select this div and change its color. Okay. So we're going to break down the problem into smaller problems. And the first problem is how can we actually select this div? Okay. And that is done through using something called DOM. No, it's not dumb as in stupid. It's DOM. Which means document object model, and that is something created by JavaScript for JavaScript, and it basically breaks down the web page elements into objects. Okay, so and the biggest object that's sitting at the top is called the document object, and if we actually go type in DOM tree in Google, we can see it, and this is the object model of the any HTML page. So everything starts with the document. And then we see the root element, which is HTML tag, and then in which there is a head tag and a body tag. In the body tag, there are a bunch of elements, whatever there are. and each of them have attributes. Also, in the head tag, we have a bunch of elements, and those also can have attributes. And JavaScript is able to change all of that. Okay, the JavaScript must be able to modify everything in the document object model. And the workaround in actually using that DOM object, that document object model, is to do something like this. We can say document dot, and then we can use a function, okay? A function called get element, but by ID, and then inside of it we put the ID of that tag, that tag, which is the div element. And then, for example, we can say main div or blue div actually. We put this ID inside, and this way we have actually selected this element with this ID from the document object. Okay, so let's go over it one more time. We say document.getElement by ID. This function is pretty self-explanatory, right? It gets an element by searching for its ID. And then inside of this, we put the name of the ID within quotations, double quotations or single quotations, it doesn't matter. And this way we actually select this, okay? And then once we actually select this document object, this element, then we can do cool stuff with it. For example, we can use a function called .att, okay? Sorry, no, this is actually not correct. .style. Okay, and this way we actually, what we do is we access this style object for that element, and then we can say .style background, okay, is equal to what? Say, I don't know, blue. Yeah. So if we actually run this one more time, oh wait, what's happening? The problem here is something interesting. It's because our script is actually being loaded before the HTML elements are loaded, okay? So what we have here is, okay, we start from doc type, then we HTML head, and then we do all this, we add all this, link the style, give it the title, and then we run this script, okay, and then we actually define the body. Meaning that when the script is run and it tries to change the background of something with the ID of blue div, okay, it doesn't. This blue div doesn't even exist at the time. Okay, so what we're gonna have to do is actually we have to either put this at the end of body, okay, just to make sure that everything is run before that, or well, I mean there are other ways which I'm going to show you later, but this is the best thing we can do for now. So we're going to go inside here and reload this, and there you go. Now it's working perfectly, and this means that our JavaScript is actually working. So see what we're doing here again. We start from document, the one at the top. See if we have the image here again. JavaScript, wait, HTML DOM. Okay. We start from here, then we look for an ID. We look for an element with that ID, with the ID of blue div, and then we tap into its style object, and then we select the background the background property of that object, and then we set it to blue or whatever color we want. Okay, so that's actually how we can easily select an element and then change its properties. Okay, yeah, that was easy, right? It wasn't that difficult to change style of an object, of an element. Sorry. The next challenge actually is to get the program to understand when we actually click this button. Okay, so we wanted to, that we want something to happen when we click this button. We want a function to be attached to when we click this button, and that function is changing the color of this div. Okay. And the way we do this, the way we get the program to understand that, hey, I clicked on this, okay, now you got to do something for me, is through something called events, okay, and event listeners and JavaScript. So an event listener is something that's always waiting for something, something to happen, okay. And when we give an element an event listener, it means that that element is now waiting for an event to happen on it. JavaScript has a list of a huge list of events that can happen. We can actually see JavaScript events, and there is a bunch of them. There is like a lot of JavaScript events. For example, there is onChange, there is onClick, there's onLoad, there's onKeyDown, like a huge list. And click is one of those things, okay? Meaning that click is an event that occurs on certain elements. So when you actually click on this, that's an event, okay? That's happening. If you click on the body tag, which is over here everywhere, you're clicking on something, and that's an event that's happening. So when you click on this button, it's the click event that is happening on button, okay? However, the button isn't really listening for that event. It's not waiting for that event, okay? Unless you write a JavaScript code that says, hey, listen for the click event on this element, and when the click event actually occurs, then do this function, okay? And the way we do that is through a very interesting piece of code that's like this. So we say document dot get element, again, same thing, get element by ID, okay? What was the ID of our button? We give it the button of change color, okay? And then we say, we give it this ID inside this. So now we actually selected the button, okay? And then we say dot add event listener, okay? So dot add event listener actually adds an event listener to that button and gets it to listen for a certain event. What is the event inside this function? The event is going to be called, as you might have guessed, click. So when you right click, it's actually listening for that event. And then as the second parameter of this function, we put something called a function, okay? Another function, meaning that, okay, hey, change color. When click happens, when somebody clicks on you, do this function for me, okay? We can actually go ahead and straight up just define a function over here, okay? Here I'm reminded that I need to explain what functions JavaScript are. So functions are, okay, let's say we have this code, var x is equal to 2, okay? And then x is equal to x multiplied by x multiplied by x, okay? And this is a piece of function, okay? This is a piece of code that, let's say we have to run this in our code like 10 times, okay? So a very good thing to do would be to actually compact this into something called a function, these two lines, or however many lines. In many cases, the functions are like many lines of code, hundreds. But like in our case, it's 2, and we say we have to like repeat this piece of code in our code like many times, 10 times. And instead of this, what we do is we define a function called cube, okay? And then inside of it, we give it a parameter, okay? We say x, and then we open up curly braces and say x is equal to this, okay? So what we do is we define a function called cube, and which receives a parameter called x. And what it does is it basically returns, it basically makes, puts the cube of x into x. It puts it back into x, and then it returns x, okay? So if you, right now, if I actually console.log cube of 5, we expect to get something like 125, okay? Because first of all, if you write cube 5, it goes into the code, it puts 125 into a variable called x, and then it returns 125, right? And then it basically sets the variable, the value 125 into the function called cube. Okay, so if we actually console the log cube of 5, we expect to get something like hopefully 125, not something like, hopefully 125. Let's actually remove this code. So we define this function, we run this function here, and let's open up the console of this browser, reload, and yeah, we can see 125. And if we change this to 6 or 8, whatever, reload the page, we can see 512. And see, we just made 2 lines of code into just one function, and we made it really compact. Now this function could be like I don't know, 200 lines of code, and in that case we really had to start using a function, because that function could be used in our website like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 times, and using a function just makes it way easier to understand what's actually happening. Like giving it the name cube, you expect the variable to be cube, right? And that's exactly what's happening. So hopefully I give you an understanding of what functions are. And okay, so for now we're just going to remove these lines and go back to our code. So getting back to where we were, document.get element by ID. We get the change color, the element with the ID of change color, and what we do is we add an event listener to it, meaning that now it's going to listen for the event click, and then we get it to run this function upon clicking on it. So when you click on this event, when you click on this element, this function is going to run. And what's going to happen in this function? In this function, we are going to basically change that element's color. Okay, we're going to change exactly do this. We're going to cut this code, put it here, and yeah. So what we're going to do is just change the style, the background style of that element called blue div to blue. Okay. So now we're going to reload the page, and by default, this div was with this color. I don't remember what the name of this color, but it has this color. And when you click on it, we expect to change the color of the background color of this div to blue. Let's see. There we go. It happens. And isn't it beautiful? It's just listening for that event, and when you click on it, it's going to change the background color of that, and now it's blue. And this is really, I think we've solved like 80% of this challenge, right? And I think like the next step for us would be to actually generate that random color, and then give it that random color instead of giving it just a blue color, right? So right now we only have the blue color, and what we have to do is just generate a random string and then set the style to that whenever we click on this. And I honestly don't know how to do that. So we're just going to do a simple Google search, generate random color JavaScript. Then we're going to open this up, and we're going to use this function that this fellow programmer has used. Okay. So first we're going to say define a variable called random color, and then set it to math of flow, whatever this is. I'm not going to explain what this is now, and let's just say we copied this code that generates this random hex color for us, and let's see actually how it looks. Let's console.log the random number, random color, and see how it's going to look. So again, we're going to open up the console, and then reload the page, click on this, and yeah, see, every time we click on this, we're getting a random basically six, what do you call it? 6-character string, which is exactly like what you've seen in the hex color codes, right? So, for example, this hex color code, like 6Fs, this is equal to white, okay? And this is black, and so on. So, and these can be, this basically represents a hexadecimal color code. And this function over here, it generates for us a random color code, hexadecimal color code. And then what we actually have to do is add that little pound button, this guy, behind it, and just set the color equal to that. Okay, that's as easy as that. So we're just going to say pound plus random color, and I think that's going to solve the problem. So before actually we proceed any further, I need to explain that pound actually, I mean plus, sorry, the plus operator doesn't just add numbers, okay? As I mentioned before, variables in JavaScript don't really have a certain type. So it could be a string, it could be an integer, it could be a float. So right now it's a string, okay? So this is a string, this is also a string. And adding these two strings together, it's not just, well, they're not numbers, okay? So when they're strings, JavaScript is going to detect that, oh yeah, these two are strings, so it makes sense to just append them, basically concatenate them and connect them to each other, and create something like pound, and then after that, immediately we're going to get the random color, okay? And if we save and we reload this. Now, every time we click on this, we're going to get a random color. And it's going to set the style, set the background color of this div to that random color that we generated before, right? So yeah, this is just a small example of how we can use JavaScript to manipulate styles. We can manipulate all different attributes of HTML. And in the next video, we're going to dive really deep into how else we can actually use JavaScript to give our website cool, interesting functionalities. And I'll just see you guys there. Okay.